Thank you, Mark. So our next speaker is C.C. Humphreys. As an actor, he has performed on stages from London's West End to Hollywood. A playwright, fight choreographer, and novelist, he has written several adult novels, including The French Executioner, the Jack Absolute trilogy, which I loved, and Vlad, The Last Confession. He's also written A Place Called Armageddon and Shakespeare's Rebel, which he adapted for the stage and which premiered at Bard on the Beach, Vancouver in 2015. He also writes for young adults with a trilogy called The Runestone Saga and The Hunt of the Unicorn. The sequel, The Hunt of the Dragon, was published in fall of 2016, so that was last year. His most recent novel, Plague, won Canada's Arthur Ellis Award for Best Crime Novel in 2015. The sequel, Fire, is a thriller set during the Great Fire, published summer of 2016. He is translated into 13 languages, and I guarantee, after listening to him today, you would be totally okay with him narrating the phone book for you.
Oh, no pressure or anything. Thanks. I'm going to read actually from an earlier book of mine because these guys heard me read from the stuff last night and thought I wouldn't bore them again anyway. So I'm reading from a book called The Blooding of Jack Absolute. So Stacey will be pleased. Is it a bit early for sex? Don't know. No?
Show of hands.
Show of hands? No? Okay, good. So this is the second Jack Absolute book, but it's actually chronologically the first. Jack is, it's 1759, it's London. Jack is 16 years old, and as we say in England, he thinks he is the business. He's a scholar at Westminster. He's engaged in a romantic love for Clotilde, the French jeweler's daughter, which is all pure heart and mind. But he's engaged in rather earthlier pleasures with an actress called Fanny Harper, who's 10 years his senior, and is teaching him the ways of love, the more physical ways of love. Alas, Fanny is kept in a house in Golden Square by Lord Melbury, who is one of the most powerful men in the land, and he visits her sometimes. Anyway, Jack is there, having taken in the examples of a lesson he learnt the previous week. "A gift," she said, as he returned to his satchel, which he had dropped by the window. When he came back with the jar of brandied peaches, she sighed. "So sweet, but I've told you, Jack, I want for nothing, so you should not spend the little you have on me. Those are a token only." He pulled out the papers. "This is the real gift, and the only expenditure is from my insufficient self. Have pity, for it comes from my heart." It was not quite true. Other parts of the body had inspired Jack in his endeavors, together with the memory of a night the week before and a quite extraordinary lesson. "On a religious conversion by candlelight," he announced. "Shall I? Please." Clearing his throat once, he began. "When I first run my tongue down your smooth thigh, just like a priest, I kneel and bend to pray, and gaze with his same fervor, for on high my altar calls, and sweet scent guides my way. On both our passions candles cast their light, but his reveals nothing save pure gold. A richer treasure far is in my sight, whose soft and flowing red is warm, not cold. Then with my stubbled chin I lightly climb the full perfection of those luscious slopes, and kiss so soft yet building up till time itself takes pause and hangs upon our hopes. I suck you in, your flesh explodes in me, your moans, love's music set in sweetest key." Oh, Jack, that is indeed a gift worth receiving, and yet... She reached down and grasped folds of lilac silk in her hands, yet it seems it is a gift only half given. Jack looked down. The hands were now engaged in pulling the material upward. Already the silken fringe had cleared the lowermost wooden hoop. Suddenly dry-mouthed, he took a step toward her, then another, trying not to rush. "Your bedroom," he said in a voice gone quite thick. "No time." She matched him in huskiness as the material rose still higher. I am expected at Lady Dalrymple's rout in half an hour, and it took me at least one to get into this dress. Besides, and here the white silken shift beneath the gown cleared the knees, and Jack had the first glimpse of her cerise silk stockings, your poem speaks of more accessible delights. So, kneel to your devotions again, Jack. Let us see if you have truly learned your catechism. And if you have, a further lesson awaits you, or should I say reward, for I shall show you the way I really like to consume peaches. At that, she popped the lid off the jar, slid her fingers into the depths, and produced one soft and succulent segment, sliding it into Jack's mouth, flooding it with fruit and cognac. Her wet hand then disappeared up within her gown. What was it, Jack? And sweet scent guides your way here. As she reached fully up, her eyes half closed again, while her other hand snaked behind Jack's head, applying a little pressure. Jack had prayed for this from the moment he awoke in his bedroom that morning. She had managed to raise the hoops so they concertinaed a little, just enough for her to rest her buttocks on the table's edge and for him to slide under the rings of wood. Cotton encased him. It was like a cave with a treasure at its limit, delight beckoning him toward it. But the poem was in his head, and he turned aside, his lips finding the stocking on her left thigh. Running its length, he came to the tie that held it there, a bow, a single, simple knot. Putting his teeth to it, he jerked it free, and in the little gap created, inserted his tongue between thigh and silk. He heard, as if from far away, the groan. Thinking where once was good, twice was better, he switched to the other side, teeth seeking, finding, pulling again. This lace was longer, his head reaching back till it was pressed against a hoop. Twisting, freed it, and once more his lips found a paradise that, until recently, he never knew existed. The softest skin near the top of a woman's thigh. This groan came louder through the folds. This high, the cave had become darker, and there was little air. It made him giddy, the lack of it, and what there was so rich and dense. The undergarments ahead of him were, of course, not joined, something else he had not known before he'd embarked on that first exploration the week before. Thus, he only had to part the fold of these smaller shifts, which he did with gentle fingers. His palms spread to the side, pushing out the thighs just a little, before his face pushed forward once again. He was nearly there, nearly drunk with the closeness and the glorious, now brandied musk of this place. Turning his head to the side, he nipped very gently that last fragrant inch of flesh, then reached forward. He was nearly knocked backward. Fanny had suddenly pushed off the edge of the table. As it was unlike her to rush so, he was just about to mention it when the near darkness became complete, with the concertinaed hoop suddenly unfurling again and the swathes of material dropping to the floor. She had stood up, and he was crouched inside the tent of her gown. "Fanny, what?" he gasped, and then received a blow to his head through the silk that made him wince. But he didn't attempt to speak again, halted not by the pain or even the lack of air, but by heavy footsteps. "That idiot Cardew chose today of all days to have a stroke." Lord Melbury's voice was trained to overcome the protests of the opposition raised in the House. It easily pierced the layers of cotton and silk. He could not move. He was frozen there, on his knees, his arms now dropped and held to his side, while Fanny pressed on him from above. Glancing down, in the little light that spilled under the fringe of her dress, Jack could see that she was standing on her toes. Scrunching his neck allowed her to at least settle, but she was still, essentially, sitting on his head. Ah, my dear, I'm so delighted to see you." "Yes, well, cannot stay long. Lord Wolvermere's backbone needs stiffening over supper. Infernal idiot wants to back down on the naval requisitions. I must be away to White's in 1 hour. Plenty of time. Hello, what's this?" Jack's own backbone stiffened. He saw the shadow of feet moving past Fanny's, and he prepared for discovery. "Pot and pineapple peaches. Did I send you these?" "You did, my love, ever thoughtful." Jack marveled at the calm in Fanny's voice. She was quite still above him, had not moved since she settled. There came the sound of slurping. "And I have excellent taste. Marvelous things. Uses good brandy rather than bad, that's the key." There was a pause while more peaches disappeared noisily. Then he said, "Why are you standing there like that, Fanny?" Why, I thought I might recite to you." "Recite? I had something rather different in mind. No time, do you see? Oh, only a short poem. I wrote it for you. Thought it might stimulate you, knowing your love of such verse. Ah, the salacious tone of the monosyllable was clear. Well, why not then? Long as it's not too lengthy, eh? Sit, my dear, sit. Jack felt Lord Melbury moving away. He had met him on several occasions, as he was a great man of the theatre, and patronised a stable of playwrights as others might own racehorses. Lady Jane, Jack's mother, had once been favoured, until she failed to acknowledge the patronage with something other than words. He was a big man, but nimble with it. He was also renowned as one of the best pistol shots in England, a thought that made Jack freeze even more despite the growing pain in his legs and neck. The sofa squeaked as his lordship sat. Very well, you may begin. Jack wondered what she was going to do. Recite something? She had been an actress, after all, or extemporize. She certainly had the wit. But what she did do, Jack had not expected, for she suddenly leaned away from him as if reaching back, then straightened again. Her voice, when it came, was quite clear. On a religious conversion by candlelight, she announced. Jack's first thought was, plagiarism, by God. The damned woman had claimed this as her creation. Then, as she began to read, he had two other distinct feelings. One, at his groin, which had never really gone away since he'd woken up, and the other, higher up, in his throat. Jack began to giggle. What was the woman playing at? He hadn't written an epic poem, but a sonnet, 16 lines, no matter how slowly she took them. 16, and then Lord Melbury would seek the place that Jack had been denied by this interruption, no doubt further inflamed by the sentiments he'd so skillfully rendered into verse. The more he tried to stop the giggles, and he could tell by the poem's increased volume that they were audible, the more they came. Her rendition of the poem had become positively dirge-like. "Pick it up, girl, for Christ's sake, I do have a supper appointment," came a bellow from across the room. Absurdity was mastering him. Air was scant enough in his cave, and he was trying not to breathe too much, as he feared it was fuel to his laughter. He feared he was going to fall or faint. He assumed she must have a plan for the sonnet's end. He needed to stay conscious long enough to react to it. The poem ended. Lord Melbury clapped. "Bravo, my dear, bravo. Exquisite sentiments, beautifully expressed. And you were quite right as to their effect." The floorboards creaked as he stood. "And now..." It was then Fanny screamed. "Ah, what is that? Damn, what? Where?" "There, my lord, there on the wall, behind you." The emphasis on the words was an unmistakable hint, and as she said them, the hoops were ratcheted up, and Jack was exposed to the light. He saw that his lordship had taken the bait, half turned away. The window was open. He made to rise, and fell. The cerise stockings, which had slid down, had somehow become entangled with his ankles. Jack thumped onto the carpet. Lord Melbury turned. His face, which had often been likened to a fish in the broadsheet's caricatures, took on an aspect of salmon now. Lower jaw dropping to his chest, Jack, half in and half out of the dress, smiled up. Couldn't think of anything to say. No one could for what seemed like minutes, but couldn't have been more than a few seconds. Then everyone talked or shouted at once. "Young absolute, my lord, of course I can explain." But of course she couldn't. Fanny had been a fair actress in her day, but Peg Woofington could not have got away with this one. Lord Melbury started forward, his face dangerously mottled and his large hands clenching and unclenching. "You puppy! By God, I'll... Fanny stooped, whipped her stockings away from Jack's ankles. "Go!" she hissed. "Go!" Jack needed no further urging. He scrambled to the window, was through it and over the balustrade in a moment. The vine provided handholds, though he ignored nearly all of them, sliding most of the way to the ground. He exited as he had entered, though now, as he ran down the garden, a furious voice followed him. "I know you, whelp, you and your mongrel family, and you will pay for this. By God, you will pay!"